So it's a real sort of top-down view of how people see cybersecurity, because a lot of people go around saying, well, what is cybersecurity? So here I was trying to answer it. So you can tell me at the end or tell me later the bits I missed as we try to sort of catalogue, if you like, what cybersecurity is. So I hope you like that. But before I do that, there's a couple of things that I'd just like to say. I'd like to say what a brilliant job you guys have done. This is the first time we've been involved in this. It's certainly the first time I've been involved in it. And both the victims, sorry, the students, and malware and Dr. Evil and their accomplices, they've done an absolutely super job of torturing you, and you've done a super job of responding to that. It really has been fantastic. I mean, that video we saw before, you were fantastic, you really were. The way you responded to some of those really difficult questions, it really was supreme. The thing I would point out, though, is that we haven't brought the death sentence back in. And actually, it wasn't you that was under trial, team, so you were that serious there, but it was absolutely fantastic. But actually, we're going to need those skills because something has happened. You know, we had this nuclear power station, and you know I told you about this RIMNet thing. Well, the Prime Minister has today pulled COBRA together, and we've got some serious talking to do. We need to get our act together and come up with a story, because this is what's happening. Can I just use that device we used last night, which was click? So unfortunately, the UK's radiation incident monitoring network has picked up what you did to us. So we're in serious trouble now. We seem to have lost most of Ireland as well, but that's a political thing. Click. So, oops. So what we need to do is lock the doors, get the guys in, because we might actually all be there as witnesses, so we need to get a good story together. Right, okay, cybersecurity. Click. Thank you. And again. Just very, very briefly about Ultra Electronics, because we're the company that nobody's ever heard of. So we're into cybersecurity, we're into aviation, military, we're into nuclear and stuff. And the common theme is if it's difficult, we tend to do it. It's safety critical stuff, things like that. We don't do training, we don't do consultancy, and that's partly why you don't hear much of us in this space, because we do some sort of deep technical stuff. We've got about 4,500 people, UK, US, Middle East and Australia. We put a lot of money into product development. I talked a bit about that when we talked about behaviours and things. We don't put money into, you know, when you get a project, you win a project, you think, oh, this is a juicy contract to put loads of new tools and things in. We don't ever do that because we want to make as much money as we possibly can out of a contract so that we can take money out of that and invest it in the future, because as soon as you start innovating on a contract, you then hemorrhage on a massive scale if you get it slightly wrong. 5% problem on a project costs millions. So we learned that lesson once, and so we never do that again. We're a UK company, head office just outside London in sunny Greenford. That's where God would actually put the enema if he needed to. North America is about 50% of our business, Middle East and the rest of the world is about 50% of the remainder, with the UK, the remainder of that. So that's all I'm really going to say about Ultra Electronics. Click. Okay, so why are we where we are? Well, the massive growth of the internet, of course, we know all about this sort of stuff. India have pledged to put fibre optics to all the villages, which they're talking about really energising the internet to probably another 2 billion users over the next 5 years. So, you know, that's going to make massive transformational change. Similar things are happening in South Africa. So, Tim Berners-Lee talked about in the Financial Times not that long ago, I think it was about November, that we need to start again. We need internet too. We need to start with a security architecture and build all of these great tools on top of it. You can't really do that though. You can't start again, can you? So it'll be sticking plasters to getting to that secure position over time. But there are other drivers that I'll talk about in this presentation that cause us to really get our act together quicker than we have been doing. So the internet's driven by utility, the idea that I can do all of these fantastic things, and the certificate comes up and says, do you really want to do this? Oh yeah, sure. No, stop asking me these security questions, I just want to do it. We all do that. It's about utility, it's not about security, and that's the problem we've got. Click, thank you. So we defined cyber as this. It's actually pinched from a US definition of what cyber is. And it's the internet, the information systems, blah, blah, blah. But also, very importantly, that the US didn't include the people that use them, because that's, you know, part of the exfiltration threat, for example, is missed by some of that definition, unless you include the people. We further defined it as data, devices, networks, and people, just so that we could do what we're going to do in a few moments, which is actually define some niches. Because when the analysts and the investors who are looking to invest billions in this sort of technology analyse the market, they can't actually get down deep into the technology. They're very good comparators. They look at what other organisations do and say, well, this company does this company does this part of the market's going down, this is going up, where should I invest? It's not actually on a technical decision. The entrepreneurs that are investing might well do, but in terms of massive investments, it's based on confidence. So they wanted to be able to work out where those niches were. Next slide, please. So then what's cybersecurity? Well, it's the body of technologies, et cetera, it's protecting that, and it's the common CIA model. I don't need to say any more about that in this audience. It's that balance between availability. Other people said, when Tim Berners-Lee said, let's have internet too, others said, no, just lock everything away. Well, maybe we don't have the availability. So it's the balance between the two. Next one, please. I don't need to tell you what that is either, so I'll just jump over that one and into this. Okay, so what the city wanted to know is how cyber attacks affect business, and I'm not going to go through any of these, but you'll probably know most of them anyway. But it's the next one I'd like to dwell on slightly, because I think what's happening here is we've been trying to sort of do a rearguard action on information assurance for some time. But we need to step up the ante because of what's happening in the marketplace. You go to the next screen. Things like Stuxnet and Iranian centrifuges. 5,000 centrifuges were bust on the back of Stuxnet, which is a phenomenal number. And the Iranians thought it was just a duff batch they'd got. It was a hell of a batch, wasn't it? So that was very, very clever. And it's only in the last few months that the Americans have actually admitted to it, because you know, people have been saying to Obama, you've done nothing about the Iran problem, and so he had to, you know, release that. So that's quite interesting. But if you look back some time ago, and this was actually reported in The Economist in about 2010, but the event itself happened in, I think it was 2002 or around that sort of time. But the Trans-Siberian oil and gas lines were blown up. And it was the biggest non-nuclear explosion in mankind. And so you start to consider, I wonder if there were similar techniques. They may not have been internet enabled, but they may have been enabled for other things. And if you look at the politics around the time, that's quite an interesting story. So I won't go any further into that. Next one. Thank you. So we took these two dimensions of cyber and the dimension of, you know, the security assets of CIA. And can we go to the next slide? And came up with a fairly noddy, but it helped explain to the venture capitalists some of the things. And we in Ultra don't really, we do all the tricky stuff and some of the widgets, but we don't tend to work in the training sphere and the consultancy sphere. We really, we partner for those sorts of things. And next one. Kick it. Ah, look, we've got some more words on it. It looks the same. So we've drilled down for some more detail there. I won't go into those, but next one. Okay, so if you now look at this market space, there's the high threat club at the top, so the military, the defence and intelligence. Then you've got the critical national infrastructure and this wider market. And you can sort of start to define the market in that place, because there's a lot of people play at this level. There's a few people play at this level, but they tend to be much more valuable projects and contracts. Next one. So the investors were asking, you know, why the defence companies, for example, have got into this cyber thing, and this was part of trying to explain that, because some felt it was because they had no money left in contracts, because nobody was letting contracts in defence, which couldn't afford them any longer. And I said, well, I don't think it's that, actually. I think it's because the internet has enabled espionage. The IP threat of stealing the IP is very much about espionage. We've been doing it for years. It's just the internet's enabled you to do it easier. The other thing the defence contractors understand is it's about weaponeering, i.e. measures and countermeasures and a sort of escalation of that. And therefore, if you blend the two together with what cyber is and cyber warfare, then it gets quite tricky. So you can also look at the market from the sort of high threat club down to the sort of commercial sector down there, and also the security classification from sort of protect to top secret there. And the cryptography I was talking about the other day sort of sits in this space, so the value of each unit is fairly significant. Whereas if I was to put the crypto in a BT router in your lounge, it would be the other space. So therefore, that's where companies like us partner, and there is this sort of balance of where that sits in the market space. This is the other dimension. We're climbing up from, the hackers to the hacktivists to the spies to the terrorists to sort of national governments and state-sponsored activity in these sorts of areas. And okay, the probability of an attack at the top level is very small, but the impact could be absolutely massive. And there are those that comment that already the cyber weapons are available to completely mince the stock exchange, and China and Wall Street and those sorts of things. The reason I probably wouldn't, and the reason why we perhaps should encourage this more, is that the debt of the US is financed by China, so it would just be an own goal. So the more there is this sort of integration, the less those things become an issue. But there are other tools and other problems that we need to defend against. So this is quite a complex area. Next slide, please. Okay, to get a balance here, this is going on across the world. There are something like 22 nations that are known to be storing cyber weapons. So this is something that is causing the defences of the networks for us to take a much more serious view of. And I'll just give you a quick story. About, 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a conference in London on cybersecurity. There were 200 people there. It went from the sort of Telegraph to the BBC to the Estonians, etc., etc. And one chap got up and gave a presentation which wasn't as good as the others at first because he fumbled around and couldn't get stuff to work, etc. But then when it got going, he said, right, okay, who should we attack? And the Estonian stood up and said, let's attack China. So we got this GIS screen up with blobs of the bandwidth across the nations of where the activity was. He said, right, where do we want to go next? Said, power station. Power station. Said, right, any particular one? And they said, well, I don't know the name of a particular power station, but they could see them on there. And they went into a particular power station, just showed that they'd entered it and then came out. And I thought, that was a dodgy thing to do, with 200 people, including the press there. But I went up to them later and I said, because this was sort of early days in cyber security for me in particular, I said, well, that's potted, wasn't it? He said, let's see your badge. So he looked at my badge, and this was on the Thursday. On Sunday night, I'd been panicking to get something into work. It was about 9 o'clock at night, so there were no libraries or internet cafes or whatever available to me. And my router wasn't working, so I had a problem. So I thought, oh, Jesus, how am I going to get this? Because I'm not in work tomorrow, but somebody else needs this information. So I had a look and saw what wireless connections were available, and one came up, Claire, which must have been one of my neighbours. I didn't know a neighbour called Claire, but that didn't matter. And I thought, the problem is it looks as if it's secure, so I clicked on it. And yes, there was a password. I thought, oh God, I'm desperate, what can I do? Claire, try Claire. No, it didn't work. Internet, bang, straight in. So I sent my file by stealing her bandwidth. And then on this Thursday, this chap showed me that transaction, that email, with an embedded PDF in it. And that's when I got serious about cybersecurity. Because, and if you look back to the Chinese film there, it's not actually about we can do it, because we all know, particularly in this room, we all know it can be done at different levels and different scales. To me, the threat is the commoditization of it, the ability that I can throw a lot of weapons at something just by finding a GIS coordinate or at least a network. And that starts to get very scary because you can do this on scale. And that's what's driving this particular market. So we look at it with all of these threat vectors on the outside, the networks in the center, and that could be a single network or a nation's networks. And then this, if you like, this onion layer of protection from hardening the infrastructure, things like cryptography, static defense, to monitoring intelligence, things like IDS, IPS, those sorts of things. And then the situational and awareness and stuff, so where you can do the sort of network forensics. So this was stolen from X, Y, trace it all back and work out what was behind that and what's the threat of losing that, what's the damage of using that particular information. Next, please. So I've added another dimension to our model now here. Instead of it being cybersecurity downside, when we did the sort of analysis of all the tools that are out there that support this at this sort of top-down level, it was pretty clear that these three protection layers were more important than CIA. CIA is on a different dimension, if you like. So this is the static hardening. This is the protection of the real-time dynamic stuff, and this is the analytic layer. I won't talk about the top, but that's really the exploit is code word for attack. Next one. So what you end up with is cyber security centers that look a bit like this, sort of NASA mission control. This is one in the States. This is one somewhere else in the world, chasing drugs around the world with some fairly sophisticated deep packet inspection and voice analytics. And then this one, the other one at the top there is the one that's being designed in the Middle East in a bunker. And this is the most staggering design that I've seen, and it's like 4 floors looking at this overall position. So, people are taking this extremely seriously, and we're taking it seriously because there's lots of money in it. Okay, next one. So if you then sort of map the tools to that, I've made the ones that Ultra provide green just to show you where we sit in this mapping. And the others, and it's not by any means comprehensive, I've just put some of the sort of well-known companies and products up here like Detica and Trident and FireEye and things like this. And what you see is we operate very much in this protection space down here, and others operate very much in this sort of monitoring and situational awareness space. And what we're doing is trying to set up this virtuous circle through partnerships so that you see the problems of tomorrow and fix to automate them with the products that we can install into the networks. So just to give you an idea of that, right on that side is the sort of cryptos that are used for, and high security modules that are used for X509 certification. So we, for ICANN, control the .co.uk.com certification, for example. Let me jump to this side. This is something called Energy Guard. We were working with Idaho Labs in the States to protect against Stuxnet at the same time Stuxnet was being designed. So this is a defense in depth defense that's right the way across the Department of Defense. And because they know what the attack vectors are, we know what the defense vectors are, or at least we look for them. If you take this one here, this is a series of cryptos that are used generally around government, and I've mentioned it to others, I think, earlier this week. When the Prime Minister went to Beijing, he needed to continue with doing the day job, but the crypto didn't work. And the reason for that is the Chinese blocked the networks. So Ultra looked at that and said, well, why don't we make the traffic look as if it's normal traffic, and hopefully that'll spoof to get through. So that's the sort of thing we do. Then this pair here, if you like, is the key management and the cryptos in the battlefield. So this thing called Ultra Cards here is the key management piece for about 75% of the keys in the US battlefield. So it's all about the ComSec accounting. And then this Ultra C3 is the next generation of crypto products for the battle space. As I say, we don't do that sort of stuff here for training, but we do train in our own products, etc. So we look at it from a sort of differentiation point of view. Anybody can train if they can get that material. So we look to get the IP because that gives us a differentiation against the market space. Whereas if we buy a company that's in training, all those good people go to a different company, so it's a waste of investment. Here now we're starting to see some of the other products coming in, but I just wanted to mention one or two. There's the software diodes, so the New York Transit system is protected by our software diodes. This one is a very interesting one. This is the National Resilience Extranet. I mentioned Cobra before. There's been the Olympics, won't say any more, but join the three together, and you can see where we join up 1,000 organisations in terms of the fusing the intelligence and an incident response, should there be one, on a national scale. And then we do some the analytics space, some sort of clever stuff in terms of voice print analysis. I was hoping to show a demo, and perhaps in future events such as this, we can show picking people out of telephone calls, not just by who they are, but also, you know, what their accents are, where they might be from, etc. So these are the ways of drilling down into the networks for that sort of intel data. I won't talk anything more about this, but I was talking the other day about cultural issues. These are things that are very close to our hearts. Things like this. Our customers come back to us because they want to, not because they have to. Some people will lock you into a solution. That's not the way we come from. And I would, you know, as you go out and do stuff in cyber security, you know, choose companies that take that sort of approach, because they're the most buoyant ones and they're going to take you forward rather than the people that will control you. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.